Welcome back to the lecture on listening and to the class on international business communication. I'm sure I've given you lots of theories, lots of different things to think about, to talk about, to discuss in class. I just wanted to give you a background of whatever we've been doing, and then we'll move on to the more interesting parts of the lectures on communication, which is the applications of communication, and we'll do one of those things today. So let's get started. We were talking about listening last time, and we will continue with the same thing today. Before we go to that, again the same routine. Let's start with a little bit of revision. Discuss amongst yourselves, think about this before you move on to the portions of this lecture. Think about what listening is and why it is important for a manager to listen, to develop the ability to listen. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's very, very difficult, and we were talking about some barriers to communication, with speaking and listening, and we'll talk about the barriers to listening today. But I really, really want you to think why it is important for a manager to listen, to stop speaking and listening. And we had seen this very interesting clip from the movie The King's Speech the last time, and I would like you to discuss amongst yourselves, if you've not already done so, please discuss the connection between listening and speaking, and is it always good to listen, or do you need to tune out at some point? As you saw in that movie, and of course this will take us to the next part of today's lecture, which is to the first part of today's lecture, which is the barriers to listening. And one of the barriers I can hear in the background right now, there's something that is being hammered somewhere. Anyway, so that interferes with your ability to listen, that interferes with your ability to perceive the signals coming from your environment. The one very, very important factor that we discovered from the clip last time was the king. Again, I urge you to watch the movie, it's very nice, but the king had a problem. He stammered, and and the person who was helping him with his stammering discovered that his stammering was not a biological disorder, which in most cases it's not. It was more of a psychological disorder. I'm not trying to train you on speech therapy or anything like that. I'm just trying to help you understand what can interfere with your normal day-to-day conversation. So what we discovered in that clip last time was that once the king tuned out or stopped the intrapersonal communication, we've talked about the levels of communication. We talked about intrapersonal communication, which is the communication we have with ourselves. We communicate with ourselves. We talk to ourselves. We have lots of thoughts going on in our own minds. And this is what the king was concerned about. And he had too much going on in his mind. He had this fear of speaking. He assumed that he wouldn't be able to speak, so he couldn't speak properly with a nice flow. Maybe his initial stammering was a result of some fear that had been there, but that sort of, the feedback that he kept getting from the environment fed into his fear and just increased his fear. And once this person who was helping him reduced the level of intrapersonal communication by increasing the noise, he told the king that you have to speak what is written in this book. And once the king started speaking what was written in the book, and he started focusing on something else, on something other than his own fear of speaking, his speech was flawless. So that is the connection. Listening too much can interfere with our ability to speak, and that is where I would leave this. It's not so simple, but then for the to take the conversation forward, we'll just talk about listening first. And the whole purpose of these lectures is not to train you to give you PhDs in communication or anything. It's to give you food for thought. It is to sensitize you to your environments. So that's what I want you to do right now. I want you to take this little stimulus and think a lot more and discuss amongst yourselves and discover your own unique ways of becoming sensitive to your environments. So without further ado, let's move on. Okay. There are some forms of ineffective listening. We talked about listening last time. We talked about these things in a different context. I'll repeat some of these things. It may seem a little repetitive, but it's okay. So we were talking about listening, and there are some forms of ineffective listening that we do consciously. One is pseudo listening, and what pseudo listening is, it means pretending to listen, appearing attentive but not really listening. And this is what most of you do in class. I hope not. I sure hope not. But anyway, so this is what, this is what we do when we are forced to sit through a class, or when we are forced to sit through a meeting, or when we have too much going on and we are trying to attend to various things. So we pseudo listen, we pretend to listen. The problems that can happen because of pseudo listening are, the first thing is that nothing really registers, nothing really goes into our minds. Nothing really registers with us. We don't perceive anything. We don't make connections. We don't form memory traces. It comes and goes. For the speaker, pseudo listening can cause confusion about feedback from the audience. The speaker is trying to focus on various things at the same time, and the speaker is also looking for feedback from the audience that is going to give the speaker some stimulus or some direction as to how to take the conversation forward. Even if the content is set, the speaker wants to get some feedback from the environment regarding what he or she should be focusing on, or what he or she should be emphasizing on. The content is there, but the amount of time and energy spent on every part of that content depends on what the audience wants, as we talked about. Communication, effectiveness of communication does not depend on me as the speaker. It depends on you as the listener. So you have to keep reminding me what matters more to you. And that is the hard part of these lectures. I don't have that real world feedback from here. Anyway, so pseudo listening creates a confusion about the feedback from the audience and can interfere with the speaker's ability to fairly assess the situation and be effective in situations, in speaking situations. The other form of ineffective listening is monopolizing. Monopoly, one person is sort of the be all and end all. One person takes the lead in doing things. So what monopolizing does is, how do we monopolize? We can either reroute, which means the listener keeps bringing the attention to their own selves, or we can interrupt, and you keep interrupting the speaker. This is where feedback comes in. This is how we monopolize. We keep giving the speaker that we as listeners are more important than what is being talked about. So even if the conversation focuses on a general topic per se, I am the one you should be focusing on, not what you're talking about. Please make sure everything you're saying is connected to me, and whether there's a connection or not, I really don't care. I want the attention focused towards me, towards the things that matter more to me. And how do we do this? We do this by rerouting discussions. We do this by interrupting the speaker. We do this by not letting the speaker complete what he or she is trying to say. Okay, and the problems this can create, I'm sorry they're not up on the slide, but why don't you discuss amongst yourselves? And the problems this can create are, of course, for the speaker, it can distract the speaker from what is being said. For the listener, it can give the listener a biased view of the whole situation and completely skewed view of the whole situation. Okay. The other forms of ineffective listening are selective listening, where we focus only on particular parts of communication. This is what happens when we are sitting in class with a specific purpose in our minds. It's good. It's very good to selectively listen sometimes. But what it does is it takes the parts, we decide what we want to listen to, and we filter out sounds. other sounds or other parts of the content. What this does is it shows us things that are scattered all around. It removes things from their context and just presents them to us as we want to see them. So the biggest problems because of this that can happen are, one is we tend to misinterpret things. We talked about the importance of context in understanding situations, in perceiving the situations accurately. And when we take things out of context and we see only parts of the whole and not parts, we don't see parts in context with the whole, we see parts removed from the whole, which is selective listening. We tend to misinterpret things and make our own connections, which may or may not be there. The other thing this can result in is incomplete understanding, leading to confusion or bias. If we don't see the connections that the speaker is intending to show us, we may form our own connections because we want to remember whatever we have heard or listened to. And if we are only listening to parts of the whole situation or parts of the whole thing that is being said, we will try and form our own connections because we missed out the connections that the speaker had really intended to show us, and that can lead to confusion or bias on our parts. We focus only on one side, we see only one side of the story, we see only one aspect of the whole story, and of course that can then that is fed back into the system. The speaker gets a different view and the whole communication process is affected because of that. The other form of ineffective listening here is defensive listening. Defensive listening is perceiving personal attacks, criticisms, or hostile undertones in communication where none is intended. I feel that I am the one being victimized at all times. That is defensive listening. Everybody is working against me. Whatever I listen to is things that are not in my favor. And that kind of an approach, and I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. All I'm saying is that yes, sometimes it happens. Sometimes when we are under a lot of stress, we've had things going negatively, we tend to get defensive, we tend to put up this wall in front of us where we are so scared to step out because we keep getting hurt and we keep hearing negative things. So we just put up this whole wall, and after this spate of negative things, if something positive comes along, even then we don't see it as positive. And the problems this can create is, again, a bias and unnecessary stress leading to selective listening and related issues. We are under so much stress that we are only able to see parts of the whole, and then that leads to misinterpretation, that leads to incomplete understanding, that leads to confusion and bias. Okay, next, ambushing. Ambushing is selective listening for the purpose of gathering ammunition to use in attacking a speaker. And this is what we have seen sometimes. Again, I don't think it would be politically correct for me to point out the professions in which we might see this, so I'll leave you all to discuss that. But once in a while we do use this tactic. We use this tactic in debates. When we are having debates in college, when we are having some sort of a speech competition, we look for material to attack the other person with, or we look for vulnerabilities in what the other person is saying. And or when we as teachers are listening to you, we are not really looking for information to attack you with, we are looking to note down the points that you may be weak in, so that we can help you improve upon those points, those aspects of your speech. The biggest problem with ambushing, and again, ambushing has a negative connotation, but critical listening can also be a positive side of ambushing. Problems are, it is the exact opposite of defensive listening. It is not I who is being attacked, I am the one who's attacking somebody else. I am the one who's gathering all this material to attack somebody, to catch them on the wrong foot, etc. And again, this can lead to bias and misinterpretation. The next form of ineffective listening is literal listening. Literal listening means only listening for content versus listening in context. I focus only on what I see. I don't see it as part of the whole. I don't see it in context. I just, if somebody says I'm not able to speak today, or if somebody says I'm not prepared for the lecture today, or if somebody comes to work and says I will not be able to give it 100% today, what do we say? Okay, you're not giving your work 100%, so you are ineffective, you are inefficient, you are not doing your work properly, so your salary will be deducted. You don't let the other person see where they are coming from. You don't see where this person is coming from. Maybe they've had a bad day the previous day, maybe they've not been able to sleep, maybe they've been sick, but the person says, sorry boss, I could only finish 50% of the work, and that is all you focus on. You don't listen to everything else that the person has said. And we unfortunately label all these things as professionalism. I don't think that's right, but again, you're entitled to your own opinion. The biggest problem for listening biggest problem with listening for content versus listening in context is misinterpretation. All these forms of ineffective listening are not mutually exclusive. They're all connected to each other. Anyway, okay. The last form of ineffective listening that I would like to tell you about is emotional deafness. It is the mental tuning out that happens when the speaker uses terminology that turns off the listener, or uses words so embodied with feeling that the listener gets caught up in what is being said. So full of emotion. I come and I say, oh my God, communication is great. You know, you must get into communication, and I'm giving you all these theories and everything. And unless I explain the applications to your real lives, if you, as listeners of whatever I'm saying, get interested in the theories I'm talking about, then maybe you will just look at what I've said, you know, just those theories, and go deeper and deeper into it. And on the other hand, if there are practitioners who are listening to what I'm saying, they may feel uncomfortable about some of the theories I'm discussing. I accept that, because they'll say, okay, you're giving us all of this information, but what is the practical utility? And I don't care if you know 500 people wrote different things on communication. I would rather see 500 situations. So the minute I start doling out these complicated theories and these complicated viewpoints, you emotionally tune out. You're like, what is going on? I don't understand this. I don't care which theory is known to be the best. I don't care how good this person may be professionally. If she's not saying what I feel passionately about, I don't have to listen to anything she says. And that's perfectly fine. We all do it. Okay. The factors affecting emotional deafness are: one is the level of involvement. The more involved we are, the more likely we are to be biased, either in favor of or against whatever is being said in context, and the less likelihood of there is of us wanting to listen to things in the right perspective. So that is how level of involvement interferes. You know, we are so caught up with our own emotions, we are so caught up with what we feel about whatever is being said. Let's take a controversial topic, like as an example, let's take a controversial topic like the India-Pakistan crisis, for example. We all have very, very strong views about that. We all have very strong views about the manner in which gender issues are handled in different countries, and we have very strong views about about ethics, for example. I'm just giving you broad examples. So whenever we take sides, we get so caught up in emotion. I feel this about my religion, I feel this about religion as a whole. And when we start talking about these things, we get so caught up in emotion that we just tune out. We just forget whatever else exists. And it's okay. Unless you're passionate about something, you can't really move forward. But it can interfere with your ability to see things in perspective. Next, defensiveness, emotional deafness can be affected by defensiveness. If I'm insecure about something, if I feel that I'm being attacked by somebody or something that is being said, I can get more and more defensive, and that can in turn lead to all these negative feelings in my mind about what people are saying about me, and that can in turn affect how I react to my environment and what I take in from the environment. My defensiveness, we talked about defensive listening. Resentment of opposition, somebody is not too happy with what I'm saying, and somebody says, well, whatever you're saying doesn't mean anything. Somebody is and many people criticize what I'm saying or oppose what I'm saying, and that leads to, or what I feel, and that leads to so much of discomfort that it interferes with my ability to listen to those people. Clash of personalities, I just don't like the person who's saying things. I just don't like the person I'm forced to listen to, and my personal negative feelings about this person who I'm forced to listen to interfere with my ability to listen to this person, and so that can cause emotional deafness. Okay, next, some barriers to listening. We talked about barriers to communication, so I'm not going to repeat that. Those same barriers apply here also. Difference in context is another one. Then we have these intrapersonal barriers, barriers within our own minds, within ourselves. The first one is comparing. We compare whoever is saying, and these are the barriers to listening. If I am listening, I have a tendency to put myself in the shoes of the speaker, or I have a tendency to think, okay, if I were the one saying this, I would do it slightly differently. If I were the one teaching this class on communication, I would be able to teach it much better than Aradhana Malik, who's sitting up there and giving us all these complicated theories and all this complicated information. So you compare the speaker to yourself or others, or somebody in my class can make a better presentation on communication than she can, but she's sitting up there and I'm forced to listen to her. So that is comparing. Mind reading the speaker. You look at me and you try and figure out what's going on in my mind. I wish you could see this classroom. You would probably get a different perspective. I have empty chairs in front of me, and I'm teaching empty chairs right now, and I'm hoping that some of you will be sitting on these chairs at some point. But when the speaker says something, we try and assume what the speaker must be feeling, or we try and assume what the speaker must be or what the speaker will be saying next, and that can interfere with our ability to listen to things in perspective. The next intrapersonal barrier is rehearsing. If I'm the one who's supposed to speak next, then I keep thinking about whatever I can get from the speaker so that I can say the next thing much more effectively. Filtering, we talked about selective listening. Judging is another one. I am evaluating the person, I'm evaluating the situation, I'm evaluating the content, and I'm so busy evaluating what has been said or who is saying things or how the audience is reacting that I miss out on whatever else is being said, because listening is dynamic, speaking is dynamic, the flow of conversation is dynamic, something is coming to me from the environment and I get so caught up in whatever, and by the time whatever is reaching me, whatever is coming to me has reached, it's really in the past. I mean, if you look at it philosophically, the next thing is on its way. So by the time I process the information, it is already outdated by a few milliseconds probably. But anyway, dreaming, my God, what a boring lecture on communication. I don't want to listen to all this. I'll just read all the slides and I'm thinking about the next meal I'm going to have with my friends and just mentally tune out. Identifying. You identify with what is being presented. Some communication teacher in the classroom could be looking at what I'm saying and saying, oh great, somebody else feels the same way that I do about communication. Great, I hope some of you are able to do that. And so you identify and you're like, yeah, this is what really makes sense. Advising the speaker, senior professionals, welcome your advice, looking forward to it. If you're sitting in the audience, if you're listening to my lectures, my reviewers would probably be wanting to point out things, and you'll say, okay, I need to advise Aradhana on these things. Don't mumble too much, don't go off track too much, don't get repetitive. And you're so busy looking for opportunities or looking for instances where I tend to repeat things that you miss out on what I'm saying next. Sparring, again, being quick to disagree. Some of us have that habit. We immediately, no, I feel wrong, I feel we immediately, somebody asks us something and we raise our hands and we say, I disagree, I have a different point of view. It's great to have a different point of view. The coaching centers for MBAs and interviews and all those places teach you to have an edge over others. And how do you develop that edge? By being different. And how do you be different? Because you question everything and you sort of have this different angle, different different perception about everything, different ideas about different things. And unfortunately, that can interfere with your ability to listen to things that you might actually agree with, because you're so busy trying to develop that edge about over the others in your team. When you go for these group discussions and all, what do your coaching centers tell you? Again, this is not an attack. This is, yes, it has to, but it has to be natural. It can't be taught. It has to develop with practice. So what do people tell you? That you need to have an edge over the others, and in your attempt to convince the evaluator that you have an edge over the others, you immediately look for things to disagree on, immediately raise your hand, immediately jump into the group discussion and say, I disagree, and then your attention is focused on you and you may end up repeating the same thing again. But so that is sparring. Being right is your inability to accept criticism. Again, I am the biggest defaulter here. It is hard for us as we grow older, as we gain more and more knowledge. It is hard for us to accept that we could be wrong in some situations, but everybody has a right to their opinions, and everybody has a right to critically point out things that they do not agree with. Some of us have a higher inability or are not as able to accept criticism, and that can interfere with us, with our listening, with listening to things that might actually help us improve whatever we are doing. Derailing, some of us, we just change the topic because something else takes priority. And placating, and once in a while, just to avoid disagreements, just to avoid a negative situation, whether we agree with something or not, we just completely miss on the things. We want to be accepted, we want people to like us, so what do? We just keep nodding our head. Somebody says, okay, do you agree? Yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. So that can interfere with our listening. Okay, some characteristics of effective listening. Listening requires empathy. You need to feel what the speaker is trying to tell you, and that will help you listen effectively. It must be active and dynamic. It is most effective when in context. Listening has to be active, it has to be constant, it has to be constantly evolving. It is most effective when in context. You need to listen to everything that is going on around you, and only then can you perceive things appropriately. The response should address the feelings expressed by the speaker. However, see, you listen to react, you listen to respond, and when we listen actively, we also pay attention to the feelings of the speaker, and when we draft our response, it should be able to address the feelings expressed by the speaker. All communicative cues accompanying the message should be considered. Again, I can't emphasize less on this. We need to see things in context. We need to notice the verbal and non-verbal signals and everything else that is coming. All these communicative cues, communicative hints that are coming to us from the speaker. And once we do that, we are able to listen to things properly, actively, effectively. Okay. Now, when we are listening critically, We also need to we may need to judge the accuracy of the speaker's conclusions. When we are listening for feedback, and we'll come to feedback a little later, the first thing we need to listen to is the speaker qualified to draw the conclusion? Is the speaker in the right spot? Has the speaker actually observed the concept or issue about which he or she is talking about? Does the speaker have a vested interest? This will help us assess the speaker, assess the context, assess the listening situation. Does the speaker have a vested interest in the message? And again, this could lead to sparring, it could lead to selective listening, it could lead to defensive listening, it could lead to other forms of ineffective listening. Is adequate evidence presented to support the conclusion? Is the evidence relevant to the conclusion, whatever the speaker is saying, if we are listening critically? Does contrary evidence exist that refutes what has been presented? And does the message contain invalid or inadequate reasoning? So these are the strategies that we will need to, or these are the questions that we will need to ask ourselves when we are listening critically, when we are listening for specific pieces of information. Some strategies for listening. When you're trying to listen, various things that you can do are: one is identify the goal of the message for the speaker as well as for yourself as the listener. What do I want from this? Prepare yourself mentally to receive the message. I want to get it. I'm open to new opinions. I'm open to the signals coming to me from the environment. Let the speaker complete the message before you respond. Withhold judgment till you are asked or expected to respond. Hold on, listen, let the speaker complete the message. Remember, every word uttered is not a problem that you have been invited to solve. This is one tendency that all of us, including me, need to curb. So don't offer advice till you're asked for it, and you'll be able to listen better. Okay, some prescriptions for effective listening. Be alert. Avoid internal and external distractions. Stop the intrapersonal communication. Let the speaker finish. Let the speaker stop what they're doing. Concentrate on the content, feelings, and expressions of the speaker in that order. First on the content, then the feelings, then the expressions. Take all of these together and then try and understand what is really going on. Take notes mentally as well as physically. Remember things, tag them with your memory traces. Respond positively, verbally and non-verbally. Be as positive, try and see various things in perspective, and ask questions if and where possible to remember what has been said. The next thing that we will talk about, and I hope we have time for this, if not we'll probably just take it to the next session, but I hope we'll be able to finish feedback. It's not too tough. So anyway, feedback is an application of listening, and that's why I've included feedback in the lecture on listening. I'm sorry about this. Okay. Feedback is an application of listening. Feedback is a basic response to what is heard, read, or seen. It is information that is fed back to the sender, indicating to what degree a message has been understood, believed, assimilated, and accepted. We call it feedback because we feed the information that we derive from the message that we have received back to the speaker. Now, in the context of organizational communication, system inputs carry with them information that is useful in both regulating the relative openness of the system itself and coordinating the efforts of the subsystems. This information is called feedback. I would really urge the teachers teaching this course, or the listeners, or the students listening to this course to focus on this, and I will repeat this and I will explain this in the next class. But I really want you to take the second portion and think about it, and we'll talk about it more when we talk about organizational communication. Some consequences of feedback. What does feedback do? Feedback, when we receive feedback, the action of the sender affects the reaction of the receiver. So when we give somebody feedback, we listen for feedback. We listen and then we respond. This is the next step in listening. So the action of sender affects the reaction of the receiver. The reactions serve as feedback and allow the sender or receiver to check up on himself or herself. Okay, and so this is constant. Message is sent, received, then the next message is generated based on the message that has been received, and this next message that is generated is called feedback. When a sender receives feedback that is rewarding, he or she will continue to produce the same kind of message. If the feedback is non-rewarding, he or she will eventually change his or her behavior. Okay. The receiver exerts control over the sender in that the kind of feedback provided determines in part the next set of behaviors of the sender. So what we get is the stimulus. Again, all this sounds very complicated, but it's not. We are essentially talking about the impact whatever we say has on the person receiving the message and how this leads to drafting of the next message. That's pretty much what this means. Some types of feedback. Positive feedback is information that alerts the subsystems to move from status quo behavior to a specified state of behavior. When we give somebody positive feedback, we evolve things. We take things to the next level. We say, okay, you're doing a great job, let's make it better. So you specify the next stage. This is the status quo, this is where you're expected to be. Let's move to the next stage, which is definitely better. Great, you've done a great job, let's move to the next stage. Negative feedback is information that indicates to the subsystems that they should return to the status quo. This was not expected of you, please come back and do what is expected of you. Status quo is what is expected of you. I am not happy with your performance. Please start performing the way you are expected to perform as an employee of this organization. Please start studying the way a student in this great organization is supposed to study. Okay, so this is what is expected of you. Please come back. Okay, feedback requires critical listening, which is what we just talked about. It involves analyzing and assessing the accuracy of the information presented, determining the reasonableness of its conclusions, and evaluating its presenter. And I'm sorry about that slide being a little earlier, maybe I should have replaced it. Anyway, it involves when we critically listen for things, and again these two things are interconnected, so it becomes difficult to sort of place these concepts. Anyway, critical listening involves the analysis of the speaker, the speaker's context, the analysis of the content, the assessment of the accuracy of the information that is being given to you, and determination of the reasonableness of its conclusions and evaluation of the presenter. It also involves critical thinking, which is the ability to analyze and assess the accuracy of the information presented. Okay, ensuring utility of feedback. How do you ensure that the feedback you receive is really going to be useful? The first thing that you can do to ensure the utility of feedback is that the person receiving feedback must understand the information. Before you decide that feedback is going to be given to somebody, you must ensure that the person who's getting this feedback is actually able to understand the information that is being given to him. The second thing that you need to do is ensure that the person receiving the feedback is able to accept the information. The person must be open to receiving the information. You should draft the information in such a manner that the person is able to understand what you're saying and also is willing to accept the information. And the third essential thing in feedback is that the person receiving the feedback should be able to do something about the information. Otherwise, giving feedback is pointless. Why should you critically listen to something? Why should you critically analyze something? Unless you're able to tell the speaker, let's go back to the slides on How do you assess feedback? Okay, so when we judge the accuracy of speakers' conclusions, this is the prescription for critical listening. Why should you spend so much time in assessing all these things if you feel that the speaker is not qualified to draw the conclusion? What is your next step going to be? And how will you communicate this to the speaker? If you feel that the speaker has actually not observed the concept or issue about which he or she is talking, how do you know that this is not true? And two, what can the speaker do about it? Is it really possible for the speaker to go back in that situation and do something about things? Or will the speaker need to get some training, or will the speaker need to develop some more insights? So what do you want the speaker to do? Will the speaker be able to understand the terminology you're using? That is why I spend so much time explaining all these difficult terms. I know some of you may be experts in communication, may have written books on communication, but I also realize that these lectures are going to be broadcast, are going to be used in smaller colleges and schools all over the country. And they are going to be used in colleges and schools where people may not have had so much exposure to things. So that's why I repeat things, so that it becomes clearer. And again, I may not be as effective, but then, unless you can tell me what I can do to improve upon whatever I'm saying, your spending time on all of these things will be pointless. Does the speaker have a vested interest in the message? Why am I telling you all these things? Or why would anyone come and talk to you about what is the purpose of the speaker's speech? Is it entertainment? Is it persuasion? Is it to clarify something? Is it to defend themselves? Why is the speaker saying it? And if the speaker is not assessing both sides of any concept accurately, what is the reason for that? And what can they do about it? Is it really their goal to be fairly presenting both sides of the story, or is it their goal only to be presenting one side of the story? If you are a publicist for any organization, it is not your goal to advertise the positives and negatives of any situation. You will be forced to highlight, if you're an advertiser or publicist or somebody who's just trying to, or a campaign manager for something, you by nature of your job are required to highlight the positives about your organization or the person you're representing, and downplay whatever is negative or not so appealing about the organization or the person. So you have to find out, when you judge the accuracy of somebody, of what has been presented. And so similarly, the other questions also is adequate evidence presented and other stuff. I mean, we have to really find out where the person is coming from and whether the person will be, one, able to understand what you're saying, two, be willing to accept the information you're giving them, and three, would they be able to do anything about it? If they are presenting a biased view of a situation, you give them the feedback that no, even if you're an advertiser or a publicist or a campaign manager, I expect you to, it is ethical that you present, yes, it is ethical that they present both sides of the story. But then they also have to decide between the demands of their job and the reason that they have been appointed as publicists and campaign managers and advertisers for a particular product. So it is also their job to ensure that the product sells. It is not their job to remove these faults. Yes, you could request them to communicate whatever you're saying to the people who have developed the product so that the product is sound. But, all these things need to be considered in perspective. So that is why we need to draft our feedback accordingly. Okay, let's go back to the feedback. Okay, so this is how you ensure the utility of feedback. Ensure that the person is able to do something about the information that has been given to them. Okay, how do you receive feedback? Let's first get down to receiving feedback. The first thing that we can do about receiving feedback is, if I'm the one getting feedback, I need to be able to accept criticism gracefully, which means I need to listen. Going back to what we've been talking about, last lecture, today's lecture, we need to be able to listen. We need to be able to filter out the sounds. We need to be able to lessen the intrapersonal communication We need to be able to remove distractions. We need to be able to remove the biases, all those things. I should be able to accept criticism gracefully. Empathize. The next one here is empathize. I should be able to put myself in your shoes and feel what you're feeling, and then figure out why you're saying what you're saying to me. Apologize. In case of negative feedback, if somebody says you've done something wrong, you've made a mistake, you've hurt my feelings, I'm sorry. So I should be able to apologize, and I should be able to do something. Again, the responsibility of making any sort of feedback effective rests both on the speaker and the listener, rests both on the person giving the feedback and the person receiving the feedback. So they need to ensure that I can do something, and I need to be willing to do something, and I should be able to do something about it. Take the lead. I should be able to take the lead in resolving the situation, and or taking this, if it's positive feedback, I should be willing to take things to the next higher level, to improving, to helping the organization evolve even further, and I should be able to say thank you. The person giving me the feedback has taken the time to evaluate my situation, to tell me where I was going wrong, to congratulate me on where I was doing something right. So I should be able to thank that person for their time and effort in paying attention to what I've heard. Okay, how do you give feedback? This is the last part of today's lecture. How would you give feedback? When you're trying to give feedback to people, be direct and specific. You do need to ensure the utility, but you also need to be direct and specific. Tell them what you mean, tell them why you're saying whatever you're saying, and be to the point, and be as clear as possible. Support your feedback by evidence, especially in the case of negative feedback. You need to be able to prove your reasons for coming to the conclusions that you have come to. So make sure that your feedback is supported by evidence. Clearly separate the issue under discussion from the personalities involved. I need to be able to focus on the content within the context, but I need to dissociate myself from what I feel about this person who is talking. Okay? Sandwich the negative messages between the positive ones. Try and start, if you have to deliver a negative message, start with a positive message, then come to a negative message, and then come to a positive message. So sort of wrap one negative message within two positive messages, and that can be more palatable. Again, some people might say that this is manipulation, some people might say that this is hypocrisy. It is not. We are all humans. We all need to appreciate and respect each other's comfort zones. People will be more receptive to our messages if they know that we are respecting their comfort zones, if they know that we are sensitive to their comfort zones. Pose the situation as a mutual function. Let them know that this is something that you as the person giving feedback and they as the people receiving feedback need to do together. Mitigate or so it has to be a mutual sort of effort in taking things forward. Mitigate or soften negative messages to avoid overload. Again, this is related to the point mentioned above. As far as possible, yes, it is nice to be direct. Yes, it is nice to be to the point. But if it is a heavy blow that you're delivering, don't say, okay, you're fired. Unless you warn people that may be coming, that may be a consequence. I mean, it's always nice to, because when you give a negative message to somebody, the person feels uncomfortable anyway, and then there's this surge of emotions with the negative message. So we need to soften the blow, and it's always nice to do that, so that they are more open to receiving the messages that we are giving them and doing something about them. Deliver feedback close to occurrence. Make sure that you deliver your feedback, make sure that you give your feedback soon after the activity that you're giving the feedback on has ended, soon after you're done listening to people, soon after you're done assessing the situation. Delivery, how do you deliver feedback? Be assertive and dynamic. Press your point forth, assert yourself, and be dynamic with your feedback. Be dynamic, fair, and credible. If whatever you're saying, if the feedback that you're giving is warranted, is supported by evidence, you have nothing to worry about. It will seem fair, it will be it has to be credible. You should be the person who has actually been appointed to give that feedback. You should be the person who is in a position to give the feedback, whose feedback will be accepted. So you need to not only be fair, you also need to appear to be fair, and you need to be credible. There has to be some meat, some backing behind you. Be relaxed and responsive. Take things easy. Not literally. Be relaxed, but also be open to responses to your feedback, and be ready with your side of the story. Don't appear to be stressed, because your stress will will send these negative cues along with the message that you're delivering, and the person taking the feedback, it could interfere with the person's ability to accept the feedback. And preserve face. By face, we don't only mean the physical, we don't mean the physical face. We are essentially talking about the public image of a person. Try and protect the public image of the person you're giving the feedback to, and enhance it. If you can't enhance the public image of the person, please at least be sensitive enough to not damage the person's public image as far as possible. I know I have breezed through, I've literally rushed through this section on feedback, but I think we've just talked ad nauseum about sensitivity in communication. I can't stress enough, but again, I don't want to sound too repetitive. So it's just everything in communication is all about developing sensitivity in different areas to communication. Now, I really have some things for you to think about. We were talking about listening and feedback as an application of listening. So I really want you to think. Please list the situations where you may not have been able to listen effectively despite your best efforts. Make a list of those situations. What was bothering you? Why you were not able to listen to whatever was being said? How did this impact your effectiveness at what you were doing? You were expected to listen to something, but you were not able to do so. What did it result in? Did you get into a conflict situation with somebody? Were you not able to do your work properly? All of those things. I would also like you to discuss in your class what other applications listening might have for managers in addition to feedback. Feedback is one application of, or the next step in listening. You listen, you get these messages from your environments, and you draft your response accordingly. So that is one very, very important application of listening that I have shared with you. I would really like you to discuss amongst yourselves and think about what other things listening can lead to or can help with besides feedback. And that is where we will end our lecture today. But before we do that, I would really like you to know that we are pretty much almost done with these boring, painful theories about the basics of communication. In the next class, we will talk about communication rules, and after that we will jump into actual situations that will require you to synergize whatever you have learned till now and apply that understanding to whatever I'm talking about. So for the next class, I would really like you to read up, to listen to all these lectures, today was the 15th lecture. I would really like you to revise these past 15 lectures and come prepared to to synergize, to combine whatever we have talked about, and take things forward with your enhanced sensitivity to your environments and your enhanced expertise in communication. Thank you.